Hello everybody, welcome back to Thunder Road. I'm Paul. My friends call me Thunder and you can too. I know it's been a while and yeah, but I'm back today. Today what I am working on is a Kubota V2203 motor that came out of a semi-truck reefer unit, or a refrigerator unit. You're probably wondering what I'm doing with this engine, and as you are probably able to guess, I am going to put it into one of my Jeeps at some point. I actually am not quite ready to do that yet. There's some things that I need to do, but I like to tinker, and so I wanted to make sure that this engine ran. I bought it from a fellow in Idaho, and it came out of a Carrier Phoenix Ultra refrigerator unit. It's a pretty old engine, and I say old, I believe that it's probably from about 1999, so it's probably 25, 26 years old, but that is perfect for what I want to do. But I wanted to make sure that it ran. When I got it, the injection pump was seized up and it wouldn't start, wouldn't run. And I don't know really anything. I didn't really know anything about diesel motors. I've been a gas engine person my whole life. I've never really even messed with the diesel engine, and so I didn't really understand the injection pump, how all that stuff worked. I've since, educated myself on it. But anyway, we had to pull out this injection pump and rebuild it. It had fuel in it that was old and gummed up, and it had gummed up the mechanism inside the injection pump, and so we needed to, free that all up so that we could put it back together. It was actually in really good shape. The engine had about 1,100 hours on it, is all. It was in a reefer unit that had caught on fire. The engine didn't catch on fire, but part of the refrigeration system had caught on fire, so it was removed from the truck, but the engine was actually in really good shape. The paint on it is the original paint, and so you can kind of tell that it's, it looks pretty good. And not that that's an indicator of how good the engine is. It's just, a lot of times they get covered with oil and grime and stuff, and this one really wasn't. And so anyway, we rebuilt the injection pump on it. We put stuff in the ultrasonic cleaner and cleaned it up really good and put it back together. And so I got a crash course in injection pumps, in mechanical injection pumps to be precise, and it works. Some other things that I had to do to it, because it was from a refrigeration unit, it was designed to run at a constant RPM. It wasn't designed to have variable speeds on the motor. The refrigeration unit, they start it up and it runs at a set RPM. I think that these ran at about 2,800 RPMs and just constantly ran at that speed. If I want to use it in a Jeep, it needs to be able to work with a throttle. I know that there are people who put refrigeration units in, reefer motors in Jeeps all the time. They don't mess with the governor and stuff like that. And they say they work fine. I've talked to other people that say that they lag a little bit because the throttle's not designed to work that way. I don't know. I have the engine out. I like to mess with stuff, and so I found a different governor setup out of a a tractor of some sort, maybe a skid steer, something, I don't know, that would work with this motor. So I had to take the front timing cover off and, you know, change all that stuff to make it so that it would work with my Jeep. A lot of it is just I like to tinker. I like to get to know how things work, and that's the best way to do it, is to take it apart. At least for me, it's the best way to do it, is to take it apart and see how pieces move together and, you know, try to figure it out. And so, anyway, I did that. Replaced that governor unit, did all that stuff. When I put the front timing cover back on, it had a leak. I took it off again and realized that I had damaged the gasket, so I had to put a new gasket on the front. Now it's not leaking, but when I bled the injection system, I have had this running already, by the way, and it was running really, really good. It sounded great. The throttle response was great on it, but it was leaking oil out the timing cover, so I had to take it apart again to fix that. When I put it back together, I think that this injector, I think there's still some air in it. I don't think I got it bled all the way. And I think actually, last time I took it apart, this nut here, or I don't think that I got it tightened down all the way. And I think it's sucking air into it, up into this injection tube. So I have a misfire. What I'm going to do today is actually take this line off, tighten this up, put it back together, and hopefully that solves my issue with the misfire on the diesel. So, yeah, I'm gonna get started doing that. All right, I'm gonna start this engine and just kind of show you what I mean by a misfire. You know, as you know, a diesel engine is different than a gasoline engine. It doesn't have spark plugs. It creates the ignition point inside the piston by compressing air and diesel fuel vapors, and the friction of the molecules inside that is what ignites the fuel and combusts to make the engine work. So a misfire on a diesel is, to me anyway, is a little bit more difficult than trying to figure out a misfire on a gasoline engine, where you have spark plugs and you can test for spark and, you know, kind of troubleshoot it that way. The only thing that I can think of is, like I mentioned, when I was putting this line on, that nut right there, get you in there kind of close, was a little bit loose. I thought I tightened it, but when I investigated, it was a little bit loose. I think it's sucking some air in there and getting into there and creating an air pocket, which is creating my misfire. But I'm going to start this engine. You can kind of hear it run. You'll be able to tell, you know, see it shaking and tell that there is a misfire on it. So here we go. So you can see it kind of shaking around a little bit. Anyway, that's what I'm going to try to figure out on it today. So what I need to do is I'm going to remove the intake manifold, but I don't want to remove these injection lines, because this one and these two are bled and I think are working fine. I don't know, maybe I will and just double check that everything is tight. and then just bleed it again. Bleeding it's not that hard to do, and I'll show you how to do that. So maybe that's what I'll do. I'll just take it all off. If I do that, I may not even need to remove the intake manifold if I'm going to take this off. I think I can get a socket down to tighten those. So what I need is up above here on these injectors, I need a 19 millimeter wrench. These are a 17 millimeter, and then these again are a 19 millimeter. So I'm going to get started doing that. Just going to loosen those up a little bit. All right, now I'm going to loosen these up. The best way to get these is just to kind of move that other one out of the way. So you want to loosen up the outside ones first to get to those inner injectors. And that one wants to move on the bottom again. I'm going to hold that. There we go. Yeah, that bottom nut is loose because it's turning even with this top one loosened up. And so sometimes you may need to put a, you know, I have this little pry bar that I'm putting in there just to kind of hold that nut from turning. You can't get a wrench in there really to hold that bottom one. Yeah, that did not get tightened back up. There we go. All right, now I'm just gonna get a 19 millimeter socket and hopefully, well, I was gonna say hopefully I can get that on there to tighten that. I can't get a deep well on there because of this, so I still may end up having to take that intake manifold off. It's not that big of a deal, but just takes some time. So here we go. Okay, those are just 12 millimeters bolts, bolt heads anyway. I mean, hopefully I don't ruin the intake manifold taking this off. It's a new intake manifold and it hasn't really ran much. I mean, I have ran it probably 5 minutes tops. Okay, I'm just gonna let that hang right off there. Okay, now I can get a deep well socket over those. So I don't know if there is a specific torque setting for these. There's people online that say that these have to be torqued at a specific torque setting, but I've also talked to mechanics, you know, that work on these in the field, and they're just like, make sure they're just good and tight. And so that's kind of what I'm going at, because I actually can't find anywhere anything that says a specific torque setting. So I'm just gonna give it about a, I don't know, maybe 3/4 of an ugga-dugga on there. That one moved quite a bit. Pretty good ugga-dugga there. Pretty good there. Let's go back through and check those. What those do, from having this injection pump apart, underneath these there are some cylinders that are extremely tight tolerances on there that have a little piston that moves up and down. Those ride on a cam that is connected to the front of the motor that turns with the engine. As that cam turns, it pushes up each one of those little pistons inside this thing. Fuel is injected into those, and as it pushes it up, it forces fuel up through these steel lines, and those go into the fuel injectors, and that is the injection pump. Now, the reason that the injection lines, I mean, you have a rubber fuel line over here, you know, this is a bleeder line, an overflow or bypass or whatever that helps you bleed these injectors. But the steel lines are because this injection pump pushes that fuel through at a high pressure. Now, the way that the diesel works, as I mentioned before, it doesn't have spark plugs, but it uses the compressed fuel and air mixture to ignite the diesel fuel, the diesel vapor inside the pistons, and it does that by friction. So they need to be extremely high pressure. Now these, on this older motor, I think that the pressure is probably about 2,500 PSI, which seems like a lot. But when you consider like a modern diesel, like your Power Stroke or your your Duramax, or whatever diesel the modern diesels, they're somewhere in the 20 to 30,000 PSI, maybe even higher range of that diesel fuel, which makes them run more efficiently. It just stuff that I don't really understand. But anyway, so that's kind of what was going on here. All that these caps do is they just hold that spring valve mechanism in place on this injection pump. And so we just want to make sure that those are good and tight. There's a little rubber O-ring on those. I replaced that when I rebuilt the injection pump, so those all should be good. And yeah, anyway, I'm going to get a paper towel and wipe all that off. So there still is some fuel inside these. Inside those lines, and so hopefully this will bleed really fast that I won't have to pump. This does have a hand primer on it, and so I won't have to do a lot of priming to get fuel into those injectors. The injectors, I can actually see up here, there's fuel still in the injector. So really all I need to do is just fill those lines with diesel fuel as I'm priming it. I'm just wiping up, cleaning up, sopping up some of the diesel fuel that spilled when I took those lines off. This wire here, they just look like an aluminum solid wire that goes through, and this is connected to the glow plugs. And so I've heard people who, again, don't really understand diesel engines, think that the glow plugs are the same as a spark plug, kind of the same type of a thing, and it's not. What the glow plugs do, if you're wondering, if you already know, sorry for this, I'm just trying to help people understand what it is. But what glow plugs do is in cold weather especially, they help preheat the fuel inside the block, inside the engine, to help it ignite better in cold weather. And so the way that would work is get in, you'd flip a switch and it would turn on those glow plugs, they would heat up. And you just, you know, sometimes they're just on a timer for, you know, I don't know how long, you know, maybe 20, 30 seconds. If it's really cold, maybe a minute, I don't know. And they will, then it will shut itself off. And then you try starting the engine. You don't run the glow plugs while you're trying to start the engine. You do that beforehand, then you let off, then you try to start the motor. So, yeah, that's what that is. I think that I am actually going to put this on first before I put the intake manifold on. I can fit the intake manifold underneath that. Alright, I'm going to get my 17 millimeter. Whoops, I messed up already. Did you see what I did? I want to tighten these inside ones. Before I do the outside ones. Now on these injectors, you don't really need to crank them down super high. You don't need to get your gorilla strength on them and just bust those down. You can kind of see if I can get you in there a little closer, that on the tip of this is just a compression fitting on the end of that line, and the kind of the roundness of that fits into an equally rounded portion on the inside of the injector. I don't know if that's real good. Anyway, sorry if it's blurry, but so these are tightening them. You want to make them snug. You know, I kind of snugged that a little bit, but that, you know, that's plenty tight. Again, I'll do that on this one. You want to make sure that that little nub, that rounded portion, fits down inside the injector, and then put the cap on. And then just, you know, tighten those down. Get that where it's finger tight. Put the wrench on there. Just kind of tighten it. Now right about there, it's starting to get kind of tight, and I just, you know, maybe do, I don't know, 1/16 of a turn, 1/8 of a turn, I don't know, whatever that is. Tighten that one down to finger tight. Move that up out of the way again. And that is just a lot easier doing that without the intake manifold on. Okay, again, just get it tight and then just kind of make it snug. Now that should not leak. If you're having to crank to really put some pressure on that to get those to seal. You may have a damaged injector seat or a, you know, feed line nozzle, whatever they call that stuff. I mean, it may have a damaged something or other in there. I can't tell you what the parts are called. A thingamabobber. How's that? And but if you're really having to crank them down, there may be some damage there, and you may want to consider replacing something. And the last one, I'm just gonna get that to where it's tight. Give it about that's probably about 1/8 of a turn. Make that snug. Now I'll do the same thing on these upper ones. And I don't know if I mentioned, these are a 17 millimeter, these are a 19 millimeter up above. Just when those, whoops. Okay, now that just got tight with the wrench. I'm going to put a little support on it so that I don't bend the tube on the injector. Let's see. And just give it kind of that little 1/16 of an inch or 1/8 of an inch or whatever it is. Additional tightness on that. Okay, those are tight. Intake manifold. Take that tube off so I can tube off so I can kind of manage it a little bit, and it'll just slide right in underneath those injector lines. I hope this angle's all right. I don't have a really good tripod. I had one that was pretty good that I was using, and it fell over and got stepped on when I was moving something in the garage, and I busted one of the legs on it, and I haven't replaced it. So I have a little short tripod. Right now I've got it sitting on a little table to get this high enough that you can see what hopefully you can see what I'm doing here. A magic bolt. You ever have that where you drop it? Only fell a foot or two, but it has disappeared. I'm gonna have to go on a search and rescue mission for that bolt. I have no idea where it went. I thought I saw where it dropped, but it's not there. Got it. It fell. As always seems to happen, right in the worst possible spot, right underneath the toolbox. I might have to undo that line to get to that. Put that pry bar in there so that bottom nut doesn't move. Moved out of the way. Put that on there. See if I can get it started. You don't want to start a bolt with an impact wrench without having some threads on it. Okay. This drill I'm going to put just on the lowest setting. It'll get a little bit snug. And I'm not going to snug those real tight, or do those real tight yet. And on a manifold, an oil pan or anything like this, a cylinder head, whatever, you want to start at the inside and move outwards. What's the saying? When in doubt, circle out. Anyway, that goes for an intake manifold as well. So I'm going to start the inside. We'll do this bottom one. I mean, you get the idea. Okay. Now I'm going to get the torque wrench and just tighten those up really quick. Okay, if you're wondering, just out of curiosity, the torque spec on those intake manifold bolts is about 18 to 22 foot-pounds. And I did go through and torque those. I just did it off camera. I don't think y'all needed to watch me go through the torque sequence on them. Maybe you did, I don't know. Anyway, I didn't. Okay, now I'm going to bleed those. Okay, so this rubber line coming off these injectors is a bypass. And that's connected down here through this, which is the lift pump. The lift pump has a line that goes down into the fuel tank. I just have a gas can, or a diesel can to be correct. Pulls fuel up into this lift pump. This pump pumps it up into the injection pump. The injection pump pumps it into the injectors. This line is a bypass. What it does is instead of pushing it through these lines, it actually comes up over the top and fills these injectors from the top. Once they're full, the excess fuel runs back down this line and will run back into the fuel tank. So the way that I'm going to know that I have fuel in there is when I start seeing fuel coming back out through this line. So the way we do this, this is a little gate valve. We're going to open that all the way. That's going to allow the fuel to run up through this hose. This here, we unscrew this plunger, pops up, then you just kind of put your fingers on there and you can pump. And that theoretically is pumping fuel. And I do have fuel coming back. Yeah, let me see if I can get you down there to see that. Sorry for the shakiness of it. This is the difference between a good YouTuber and me. Okay, as I pump that, you should be able to see that, but there is fuel coming back through that line. So in theory, there is some fuel in those injectors. Okay, I'm going to tuck that back in. Tighten the plunger back up. That just goes down there and tightens in there. Tighten that down all the way, and then turn that knob shut. All right. Now, I think we should be ready to start it. So I'm going to set the camera down. I need to hook the battery back up and everything, so I'm going to turn it off for a minute. I was talking earlier about how this motor, because it was so old, is exactly what I wanted. And the reason for that is it doesn't have any of the complicated electronic stuff on it. It doesn't have an EGR valve. It doesn't have electronic injectors. It is a completely mechanical engine. And so what that actually means in real terms, to get this to start, all I have is I have the hot cable hooked to a hot post on the starter right at the top. This white wire comes out from underneath that, comes around and goes into this little plug that's right next to that. Those are connected to just a toggle switch. And the toggle switch is a momentary switch. What that means is when you push it, it only stays on until you let off. It'll automatically go to the off position. All I'm doing with that is turning the starter over. As soon as I'm done, I let go, and this engine will actually run without any other electrical connections. I have an alternator hooked to it over there. All that does is that will recharge the battery and run the systems on the Jeep when I get it going. Down here, this gauge is an oil pressure gauge that is connected to a port on the oil filter housing, so that I can monitor and make sure that I am getting good oil pressure in the engine. And so I think that I'm ready to try to start this. So I guess the question is, are you guys ready for me to start it as well? And hopefully the misfire is gone. But something else I may need to look into. When I started it at the beginning of the video, something I noticed was that the throttle wasn't responding quite right. And I'm concerned that when I put all this together, this is the throttle housing right here, that maybe somehow I didn't get the springs, you know, that are connected to the governor and all, and the injection pump. I'm wondering if I didn't get those springs installed right, and so the throttle's not responding. It responded beautifully the first time I started this motor after rebuilding the injection pump on it. This time, not so much. And so that is a concern. I may have to end up diving into the throttle assembly. That'll be a different video. And but for now, let's start and try to start it, see if I'm still getting a misfire on it. Here we go. Okay, I'm gonna have to bleed those injectors manually at the top. I did get some fuel into the injectors, but there's probably still air in these metal lines. So I'm going to crack. What I mean by that is I'm just barely going to open up these injectors. I'm just going to loosen it just a little bit. What that does is it is going to allow fuel to flow past that seat where the line is seated into the fuel injector, and it'll push any air out of those lines. A diesel engine will not run if it has air in the lines. So those are cracked. Let me grab my starter. Let's see, where can I get you that you can see what's going on? I got fuel. Got a little bit on the lens of the camera. I'll wipe that off. Sorry about that. Okay, so I got fuel coming out the top of those. Now, this engine should start. I'm just gonna go and tighten those back up again. Okay, I got those tightened up. Let's try starting this again. Hear how good that sounded. That actually solved my throttle concern also. I was hoping it would have. Yeah, because this, jeepers. Sorry about all the noise from me throwing wrenches around. I was hoping that would solve the problem. I just had air in those lines, and I may have had more than one cylinder that was misfiring, but boy, that wasn't misfiring that time. That sounded really, really good. Now I am going to put a turbo on this. That's going to be part of the plan. I have the turbo for it. I have the correct exhaust manifold for the turbo. I just need to run oil lines up to the turbo. That's why I don't have it hooked up right now. And so that's going to be another project as well. I don't know when I'm going to get around to doing the diesel swap on it. You know, this YouTube isn't my full-time job. I work full-time as a miner, and I do this stuff as a hobby on the side. And you know, I would like maybe one day to be able to make enough money on YouTube that I could possibly do it full-time, but I'm not there yet. As of now, the amount of money I've made from YouTube is exactly $0. And so if you haven't subscribed, I would encourage you to do so. If you like what you see, please like it, share the video, and I am going to, you know, continue working on the Jeep over there. You can see it across the garage. I have done some work on it, just some body work, welding up holes, nothing really exciting. I do have some video. I didn't even make a video on it. I recorded it, but it was just so boring. You know, there's a million people on YouTube who do body work videos better than I can do. You know, they explain it much better, they understand it much better, and I'm just a hack, full on, out there with the welder, welding up holes. And you know, I may show some parts of that as I continue the video. I have been working on that Jeep, but it just hasn't been really all that exciting, and I haven't wanted to bore you. And so that being said, as always, remember to love God and to love your neighbor. That is the key to happiness in this life. I promise you, when you treat people kindly like you want to be treated, life in this world would be a better place. That being said, I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.